Mayor, ready? No. All right. Call to order this January 14th, 2025 City Council Workshop. Before we begin, it's the new year, and it's good to see all of you again. Shelley, I'm going to forget some stuff tonight because it's been a long time. Thank you for keeping me on my toes. All right, do we have any public comments?
No, sir, no one signed up.
All right. Let's start then with 2A, update regarding Playhouse 2000.
Lectern here where I have an advance. I feel like I'm a long distance away here. Let me start by saying thank you for allowing me some time to come and chat with you today. It's always nice to come and give you a little update on how things are going with the Kathleen C. Callow City Center for the Performing Arts. We are really, really glad to have been management for that big facility for the last, well, 20-some years now. So we appreciate keeping you up to date and letting you know what's going on and maybe asking for a couple of favors as we go. Let me start, please, by showing you some highlights of the year that we just finished. In 2024, we had a total of 68 events, over 119 lit nights, more than one event per week over the year, which keeps a building pretty busy. We're really, really pleased that number of events and number of lit nights is up about 17% over the prior year. Some of the highlights, I know that some of you might have seen these as they went by. I don't think any of us will ever forget The Beat Goes On, 6 decades of Cher. She was absolutely amazing. We presented Brigadoon, the musical. Billy Mata was here and nearly filled the house. He was a fabulous show. A really amazing visit from Time for Three. They are an international classical music trio. They have both Grammy and Emmy Awards. We were glad to bring them to town. The Symphony of the Hills annual Christmas concert, absolutely filled to the rafters, 810 tickets sold. And a wide variety of community events. From Tybee High School, both the dance, choir, and music and band departments were all there. KISD welcomed their teachers and gave out their senior awards at our space. The Hill Country Youth Orchestras played there. The Butt Holdsworth Memorial Library has a reading club that meets in our space 6 times over the summer. And all of those are presented at fees that allow those companies to make those things happen. Quite a bit less than our standard commercial rental rate because we want to be of service to the community. Some more highlights of 2024. Our total attendance at all events was 39,400. Still below our maximum attendance goals from a couple of years ago. Pre-COVID, we were bumping our heads on 50,000, but we're starting to crawl our way back that direction. Our total ticket sales were $491,700, roughly. Apparently redundantly, ticket sales were $491,000 in ticket sales. That's interesting. Both of those numbers are up almost 20% from last year. So a couple of pieces of good news in terms of recapturing audience. Getting people back out of their homes and into the theater is a major struggle for organizations like ours across the country. We are absolutely not alone in that, and we are looking forward to kind of continuing to beat that drum as the year ahead comes along. Interesting, I think important, not interesting, but important. Nearly 10,000 of the visitors who came and saw us last year were from outside of the 78028 zip code. We are always proud of the fact that we are able to attract people from out of town to come into town, and we know that in addition to our ticket, they're also spending money at restaurants and stores and gas stations and hotels even. So we're proud of that. Moving along here, let's see, there we go. Financial activity in 2024, not as quite a positive picture as the growth in attendance would lead you to believe. We did have total operating income of $782,000, but our total expenses were $833,000. That deficit, which is about 6.5% of our total budget, is about $33,000 larger than the budget that we set for ourselves. This was a deficit projected year, but it was larger than we wanted it to be. Some of the factors related to that, we lost a major corporate sponsor this year because the economy in real estate is not as strong as it has been in the past. We saw a marked reduced individual giving in the current year, and we don't have a real answer for why that happened. We do intend to kind of follow up on that. But probably the biggest factor was flat out the increased cost of production. Everything that we do now costs more than it did just a year ago. And so that makes a big difference. I think it's important to mention too that that deficit was fully funded by money that we had on hand. We set aside as much money as we possibly could while we were closed over COVID and money sources were freely flowing, if you will. We applied as often as we possibly could and were successful in a lot of ways. And we're able to set aside some money, and that is still funding us today. And we have sufficient reserves to meet our obligations as required by our management agreement and are comfortable moving into the coming year. So for operations in 2025, we have some goals for how we're going to structure our budget. Some of the major factors are we want to make sure that we are maintaining support for our staff. We are very, very proud of the fact that of the 5 full-time people who are on our staff, and I think that's a number that we should probably say loudly, there are only 5 people who work in that space. Of those, 4 of them have been with us for more than 10 years. We're proud of the fact that we're able to maintain good relationships with very good staff people. We also want to make sure that we are supporting a good quality of life in and around Kerrville and that we are continuing to encourage out-of-town visitors. That has everything to do with high-quality performing arts events, and we intend to make sure that we're providing those. And we need to make sure that those are priced in a way that people are not scared away from the facility. We are noticing some significant relaxing of price sensitivity. We, in 2023, noticed quite a lot of pushback against pricing. 2024 eased a lot, and we're anxious to see what 2025 allows for us. We want to support performing arts organizations in our area by making sure we have an excellent performing space. We work in partnership with KISD, as I mentioned, with Schreiner University. A lot of people in our area who count on us to provide a space that they can use to represent their product to the community, and we're proud of that. We want to ensure efficient operation of facility, and these numbers are just so that you can see what kinds of things we're dealing with. Our average electrical monthly bill just for the Callow Theater, not for the campus itself, but just for the Callow Theater is $3,700 a month. Our ticketing system averages $13. Insurance, $1,250 a month. Just keeping the place clean and the lawn mowed is almost $3,000 a month. It's a building with some significant cash flow. So, and importantly, what we want to do is we want to complete our financial recovery. We want to be over the hump of the COVID crisis. We had always intended for this to be the final year of running a deficit. So we want to balance income and expense, despite the fact that we intend to be closed for about a third of the year. So that's a real challenging budget. In order to do those things, what we have to do is we have to recapture lapsed audience. We have to reach out to people who are tending to stay home. If they are able to come out, we want to make sure that they feel invited to come out. We want to recruit a new and younger audience. We want to be sure that we are enhancing our programming and specifically programming aimed at the 40s to 50s, which is when ticket buyers start to grow into the habit of becoming patrons. So we want to make sure that that's a place where we are aiming our programming and our marketing. We want to recapture, we need to develop additional contributed income. And that's a place where we have for many years been very successful. This past year was, I think, an anomaly, and I believe that we will find that we are able to recapture a lot of our individual donors in the coming year. But in particular, we are focusing on business members and advertisers and sponsors. We want to make sure that we are reaching out to the business community and letting them know how they can support this aspect of the performing arts, of the quality of life in the Hill Country. And finally, we know that we will need to aggressively pursue support through both local and regional foundation sources. So, in 2025, before we get to the construction period, we have some things coming up. Next month, you'll have a chance to see Artrageous. They are back for the first time since 2018. If you haven't seen their show, it is so highly recommended. They call it an art, music, dance circus. Is an experience that you won't have any other place. If you've been in the VK Garage Theater for the last several years and you've seen that 6 foot by 6 foot portrait of Marilyn Monroe, Artrageous created that portrait in 3.5 minutes. That's the kind of work that they do throughout the night. It's an extraordinary show. The new Buddy Holly Band is back with their new show called Voices in Harmony. We are very, very proud to be doing the regional premiere of a local filmmaker named C.J. Goodwin. He's showing his new film, Sherlock Holmes, Mayor of the Night, which is coming up in February. The Symphony of the Hills wraps up their season with just 4 concerts instead of 5. The last event that will take place in the auditorium is 3 Redneck Tenors, which is serious music presented with a kind of a funny tone. And that means that we have to complete all of our winter programming by the end of February, first day of March, so that we can allow for that construction to begin. The construction, we have some other plans as well. Over in the VK Garage Theater, we are currently in the process of updating our VK Garage lobby. That is completely designed and funded by our friend Ken Harris. He's taking that on single-handedly. It's going to be quite an improvement. And we're enhancing our concessions offers in both the VK and Callow theaters. In particular, what we're looking at is a series of specially themed mocktails, which are provided for us by a company here in town called Omakase Hospitality. Omakase tends the bar for us in turn for a portion of donations that are made for those mocktails. And they'll also throw in a little bit of cheer if that's something that you would like to have added to your drink. We can't charge for it, but that's all right. People enjoy it anyway. So during construction, we know that we are going to be closed from March 2nd through at least the 18th of July. That's what the current contract provides for. We are going to be continuing the Playhouse 2005 season in the VK Garage Theater. We're doing the world premiere of a new play called Bombshells, written by a local playwright. The youth theater is going to be back. We're very happy to have finished the first year of the return of the Playhouse 2000 Youth Theater program. We're going to be presenting the Pulitzer Prize winner Lost in Yonkers, all of these in the VK Garage Theater. We're hosting the Youth Summer Musical Theater Camp in the VK, which is going to be an experiment in crowd control, I think. But they're going to be presenting Disney's Finding Nemo Jr. If you want tickets to that, I suggest buying them now because by next summer, the place will be full. We're doing a hilarious farce called Lend Me a Tenor by Ken Ludwig. All those things will be happening while the big building is closed. And we're also looking at other possible events. Most likely what we're looking at are small gatherings and parties where people can get together and enjoy their fellowship in the building and with modest amounts of entertainment and refreshment, those kinds of things. But we're also looking at the possibility of standalone music, comedy, those kinds of things to enhance the programming in the VK. The difficulty is that because it will be the only space in which we're working, it will be fairly busy while the other building is in construction. While we're in construction, here we are, we know for certain these things are taking place because of your work, and we appreciate it. We're going to be replacing the roof, we're replacing the HVAC system, and we're correcting for damage from water infiltration while the roof was still a little bit leaky. And in addition to that, we are proposing today, we have identified some potential additional improvements to the building that may be made alongside the major construction projects, which we think would enhance the function and safety and appearance of the building and enhance the patron experience. And I'm going to go over a few of those right now. I've been really, really pleased to be working with Michael on all of these potential changes. Our big fear, I think, is a fair statement. Our big fear is that we will have invested $3+ million in upgrades to the building that to the public will be virtually invisible. They'll walk in and say, so what's new? What's different? So I think it's vital that we make sure that important things are visibly new so that when people come in, they can be impressed by those things as well. So some of the things we're talking about, we do have some concerns inside the facility. I feel very strongly that we need to make sure that we have cleaned and repaired all our auditorium seating so that everything is in top-notch shape when we reopen. We want to take a look at, push the button, there it is. Aisle lighting. If you've been in the building recently, you will have noticed that some of our aisle lighting, which is really important for safety, is not functioning at 100%. I feel like that needs to be helped. We're a little ahead of schedule. It's not like we're out of code, but while we're here, we really need to be renewing the fire-resistant treatment on all the curtains and soft goods in the building. And we want to take a look at repairing and or updating lighting, safety lighting and architectural lighting, things that make the building look good as well as make it a safe space in which to leave your car and walk up to the front door. Those are some of the things related specifically to the facility, safety and upkeep. In order to enhance the patron experience, one of the most important things we feel could be done is to update our restrooms. Any of you who have been in the building will remember that when you go to the restroom and wash your hands, the countertops get wet. We believe that that has a lot to do with the way those countertops are constructed and laid out inside the building, and I think that could be improved. In particular, we want to remove the traffic jam between the sink and the where you throw away a paper towel after you've washed your hands, because people drip on the floor. Huge safety concern of mine is a wet bathroom floor. We want to improve the comfort and safety. We want to get rid of those wet countertops. We want to make it easier to make your way through the restroom, and we want to enhance the appearance. We want to repaint. We want to take a look at whether or not we need to use a different countertop, potentially readjust the mirrors. Some of those kinds of things are, I believe, worthy of discussion. Some of you will have noted at one time or another the water fountains in the building, which are absolutely the top of the line water fountain in the country. When they were built, when they were installed, they were the very, very best you could get. They simply have suffered from the Hill Country's hard water for a while. We have identified a mechanism to make sure that they can be reclaimed, I guess is what you would say, retrofitted with parts so we don't have to replace the entire unit. We can repair what's there, and it's actually rather inexpensive. One of the things that I think would be a huge addition to the space, I've been talking with Catherine Boyette about the possibility of leveraging a little bit of money so that we could turn the main hallway inside the lobby doors into an arts display area. I hesitate to call it a gallery by any means, but simply a hanging rail and light to make sure that people could see what was there. I've been in contact with a couple of both museums and galleries in town who would be interested in using that space to display what they have. I think it would be a huge addition and a huge way to partner across the community. And once again, not as expensive as you might think to do. So those are some of the things that we have talked about with, there it is, with Michael. What we haven't discussed really seriously, and I have no idea whether this is something that could come to fruition, but I thought, I better bring it up just in case. When we take a look back at the last 4 years and average the number of the net income from presented events, the net income from rentals during the time between March 1st and August 1st, at current rates across the last 4 years, the average of income, net income from those events over those 4 months is about $50,000. That's $50,000 that would make a huge difference in our ability to balance that budget I was talking to you about. We certainly have no expectation that that would be a requirement of anybody's to fulfill, but it is a need that needs to be filled, and we're going to be looking for ways to fill it. As I said, we've been talking with city staff, and we want to make sure that we continue to have those conversations, and we want to make sure that anything that we intend to do to your building is meets with your approval. We do ask that you consider the possibility of funding those projects as part of the construction itself. But I want to be very clear that we have already started the process of actively pursuing funding for these same projects. In case this doesn't become something that the city can fund, we would still like to be able to pursue it with your approval during the construction process. So we are working along one track, and we'll hopefully work with you on a parallel track and find ways to see whether we can't make all those things come true, because I think they're all valuable additions to the space. So after we get through all the construction, we are looking at, we would like to do a very public and widely spread grand opening event. We're looking at a group that one of the most requested returns is a group called Resurrection. They do a tribute to the band Journey that is absolutely astounding. They were here about 6 years ago, and people always ask us to bring them back. They could come back and do a grand opening for us, but I can't sign a contract for that until I'm fairly confident that the construction will be done and we actually can open. So we're kind of holding those balls up in the air for a little while. And in the same way, we are completely scheduled for Playhouse 2000 to do a performance, a production of Into the Woods, the Broadway show Into the Woods by Stephen Sondheim and James Lapine, beginning on August the 15th. Should it become necessary, that can back up. We've allowed for that in the calendar, but we're fairly confident that that extra 28 days or so will give us plenty of time to make sure that the space is usable and we can get back up and running with that production, which a lot of people are really looking forward to. The Cala performances will come back hopefully in September or October. A couple of things that we have currently booked. I don't know if you know an artist named Mandy Barnett. She is a huge popular attraction at the Grand Ole Opry. She portrayed the role of Patsy Cline in the original production of Always Patsy Cline for 24 years. She is an incredible singer in her own right, and her tribute to Patsy Cline is like no other. And we're looking at a group called Christmas with the Celts, and everybody loves Celtic music at Christmas time. So those are some things that the Cala performances are looking bringing back. We're talking with Ballet Frontier, the group that did our most recent Nutcracker, to see whether they can bring their Romeo and Juliet. The Symphony of the Hills will be starting their new season in October. We'll start our Young People's Performances season in October. TAPS, the Texas Association of Private and Parochial Schools, I have to count that off on my fingers so I can say it right, will be once again in our space for the finals of their the state finals of their one-act play competition, which brings about 3,000 people a year to Kerrville who all spend at least one night. And it has been the focus of state competition for TAPS for 8 years now. We're glad that they continue to come. And if you know Michael Martin Murphey and have seen the Cowboy Christmas, Michael is projecting that next year will be his last tour of Cowboy Christmas. So we're already booked for the middle of December for that, and we think that's going to be a big hit. And I believe that concludes what I brought to you today. I appreciate the time that you gave me to kind of explain where we are and what things are going on. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for Jeff?
Yeah, what are your anticipated costs for, say, the seating, the aisle lighting, the fire resistance treatment, interior, exterior lighting, updating the restrooms, paint? What?
We are reassessing costs of those things because at the first of the year, almost every one of our vendors changed their pricing. So we're going back and looking at that. The current estimate for all that stuff we talked about is $102,000. I think it's probably going to go above that.
Okay, and, because you're also losing, $50,000 during that time as well. So
Yes.
we're really looking at a $152,000 need, right?
I believe that's correct, yeah, I wouldn't argue with that.
Okay. Thank you.
And you're anticipating a loss again this year as well from the flag attendance.
Kent, what the budget I'm going to propose to my board a week from last night is balanced, comes out net positive revenue at $6,000. In order to do that, we have to take a full 10% out of our expense budget, and we have to increase our income no less than 2%. The plan is to get back to a black ink budget. That's a stout plan.
For questions?
Yes, I have one, unless you had one. Who was, if you don't mind divulging, who was the corporate sponsor that you lost and why
Oh, sorry.
why do you think you lost their support?
Well, I know exactly why. Century 21, the Hills Realty, has been the sponsor, the title sponsor of the Cala performances for 4 years. They simply were unable to make that corporate need
Okay.
clear
I'm
to
sure
one
there
level
was.
above them.
That makes sense, yeah. They had a change in their ownership too, right. Now, I didn't know who it was, so I was just curious.
I don't mind answering the question. I didn't necessarily want to throw anybody under that bus, but.
No, I mean, I just didn't know.
But at the same time, Delane, we have not seen money from sponsors, including other fairly traditional, here's $2,000 or $3,000 at a time. Lost, 2 or 3 of those as well. Sponsorship is tight in Kerrville right now. A lot of asks, a lot of need.
Because other nonprofits are having the
Yeah.
same challenge.
Yeah.
So, there's only one other thing I think I was gonna add. I mean, I agree with your thinking about now is the time if we were going to do additional dressing up of the theater, this is a perfect time to do it. I wish I had a money tree, because then that would answer that question.
Right.
But at least I know, because that was the next question is how much, and where do you think we could get that money?
Try to find it.
I hesitate to ask, to answer.
Oh, yeah.
Like I say, I think there's probably some money that is contingent in the current budget that may or may not be able to be applied to something extra, depending on how the process goes. I don't want to speak out of turn.
Right, no, it's just.
But like I say, we are looking around both the state and the region for people who would like to help us along that way. I can't tell you right now that any of them have said yes, or even if they will. But we feel like it's important that we continue to ask. And at the same time, we're very aware that it's not our building. And we want to make sure that anything we do along that line has your full approval before we tackle it.
Well, I wish you all the best, and I'll just keep buying some tickets. How about
Okay.
that?
That's the important thing. Buy tickets and invite your friends.
Oh, right.
Those 2
right.
things.
Jeff, do you have anything?
I do, just a couple things. First, Jeffrey, thank you. It's, anybody that's ever attended an event at the Cala Theater is, if they haven't attended one, they don't know what they're missing. It's a gem of the Hill Country. As far as sponsorships, if we sponsor or we buy a sponsorship, and Kent, you might be able to answer this better because you've been on the board forever, but if we buy a sponsorship for the Symphony of the Hills, does that have any type of turnaround to go back
To
to
us?
y'all? Or does it all go to Symphony of the Hills?
It all goes to Symphony of the Hills. They are an anchor tenant of ours, and they pay, they pay regular rent, and it is not discounted, except for the fact that they have a package contract.
Okay.
So they raise money to help pay their musicians and their rent. So if they were to not be sponsored, it might potentially cause them to have difficulty paying those things. But no, none of that goes directly to us.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Very valuable asset to the community, so
Yes, thank
appreciate
you.
what you
For the
did.
report.
I don't want to speak for the group, but I think we would have consensus in staff looking at some of these proposals and coming back with concrete steps where we can and cannot help.
We absolutely can. I think we're waiting on that pricing before we would take that back to y'all for
We'll
consideration.
be able to see a more concrete plan.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Anything else beyond that? I'm not speaking for you, but I think we all want to hear back from staff on some of these proposals. Thank you for what you do. As you probably remember, I served on that board since its inception until I grew too long in the tooth to be there anymore. However, I do support Playhouse 2000. I think it's a very valuable addition to our community as, not only as the management group for the Calla Theater, but for all that you do to bring art to so many people. So
And
thank
how
you.
you pivot whenever there's a change of performer to the next performer. I love, I mean, it's such a challenge.
Thank you,
I just-
Thank you all. I appreciate your time. Thanks for
We
having me.
appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to 2B. I've never heard of a tree preserve. What is that?
What?
Let's start with Drew.
To be or not to be.
There you go.
Before you start, there continues to be confusion about the tree preservation ordinance. In that, there was an unfortunate event on Water Street some years ago where a tree was taken down and caused something of a public relations firestorm. A tree preservation ordinance predates that. It was discussed as early as 2017 and adopted as part of the Kerrville 2050 plan. People continue to think that an event that happened on Water Street is the basis for this, and it is not. I individually campaigned for this office saying I support the 2050 plan. That has been clear since I ran for this office. I think what I and my colleagues are trying to do is implement what we believe the community wants in the 2050 plan. Now, I think we're also very wary of stepping on private property rights. I individually happen to own trees. My family happens to own trees that are on Water Street. We understand that those are our trees. We get it. Another thing that people are not understanding is that in its current form, residences, households, your house, this doesn't apply to you. It applies to people who want to develop new properties. Okay? Now, we're going to discuss tonight closing some of the loopholes that we discussed last time that Jeff brought up. But in the main, residences will not be affected by this ordinance. And despite the public perception, the loss of a single tree on Water Street did not precipitate this discussion. All right, I wanted to lay the ground rules so everybody understands we're on the same page. That sound fair? Yes. All right, Mr.
This ordinance wouldn't affect that tree anyway.
No, that tree, no.
Even
It's
if
a
it was
platted piece of property, so it
Okay.
wouldn't affect that tree anyway. Mr. Paxton,
Thank you, Mayor.
thank you for your hard work on this. I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. As you mentioned, this is a Kerrville 2050 action item to consider a tree preservation ordinance. We did adopt tree guidelines as a policy to help those developing see what Kerrville was looking forward to for future developments. And then council did say, let's look at pursuing an ordinance so that it would be a requirement. Here's the tree list that we talked about. Again, it's broken down from large species and small or medium species. And then our experts in the community also included in that list aggressive invasive species that are not recommended for planting. So that for those that hear just common tree terms, they can at least check back to see if those are recommendations or not. We did change the wording to help clarify just a little bit. We are talking about tree preservation categories as a standard category, heritage category, and then properties that contain floodplain, there's a separate preservation rate for the floodplain. There's kind of a flow chart to help follow that terminology. The preservation ordinance talks about protected trees, and those break down to that standard heritage categories. And again, the 100-year floodplain preservation rate also captures both standard and heritage trees. So some of the big clarifications that we talked about last time, better defining what development means. So it's a development activity occurring on a property, construction activities and/or clearing, grading, excavating, or filling of land, any other site work that may damage or destroy a protected tree. So that's any kind of activity on the property that may impact the trees. And protected, again, is broken down into standard trees and heritage trees, as you'll find in Table 1. This is applicable to all new development within the city occurring on unplatted property. And so here's a map our GIS office put together. These are vacant, unplatted properties within the current city limits, 319 parcels. So as you can see, the bulk of the built-out interior part of town would not fall into that category. So to the mayor's point, this is not existing developments or existing homes. These are any future development. As you can see on the map, there are some small lots, infill lots within the community that are remained vacant and unplatted. These rules would apply. And as they're going through development process, just like any of these lots, there are incentives included in the ordinance, as well as a variance process should there be some hardship to that specific property that needs to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. And with that, I'll entertain any questions.
All right, before we go into questions, I want to say thank you for your repeated work on this. I think this group is very wary of curbing property rights, very wary. At the same time, I think at least this member of the council believes there's a community interest in preserving trees. Otherwise, we would need an ordinance. If there's no community interest, there's no value to the community in preserving trees, we don't need this ordinance, okay? Each of us can remember developments in town that came in and tore down trees. And those trees are irreplaceable. They're gone. And I believe from the discussions we've had that there is a community interest. And if we can balance that with the rights of the property owner, I think we will do the community a good service and also achieve another goal on the 2050 plan. That being said, I certainly respect and appreciate the input that the council's given on this matter since it came back to us several times. Thank you. It's encouraging to serve on a council with 4 adults who only want what's best for our community, who don't want to play games, who don't want to get their name in the headlines, who just want to make Kerrville better. And I think the dedication that each of us have had in reading this ordinance in its many draft forms speaks to that dedication. With that, Brenda, do you have anything you'd like to ask?
I do. Obviously, I'm looking for a balance between private property rights and adhering to the 2050 plan, which both are kind of in the 2050 plan, you know, the tree preservation stuff and private property rights. I wish there was a way where we could maybe exclude lots that are an acre or less.
Okay.
Because those are primarily going to be within the city. And those are primarily going to be for homes. And people who are building a home, I've got one going on right next door to my house right now. You know, there was a family that lived there for 30 years. They had a big clump of trees in the middle of their driveway. And the house burnt down, you know, a new family bought the lot, and they went in there, they had their architectural plans, they laid out their house, and they had to remove some trees. And it was the clump of trees that sat in the middle of the driveway. I feel like they ought to have the right to do that. So if we could figure out a way to meet in the middle and maybe not focus so much on those little 1 acre lots and focus more on, the 10 acre or 50 acre or, that would be very appealing to me. So that's all I have.
Good. Kent?
Well, I agree with that as well. I think that, but within the established city, I mean, it's obviously this within city limits, we got other parcels that I think we might be able to do it by just not including residential. Like residential construction, because you're just talking about somebody replacing a house
Yeah.
or just
Yeah.
building on a lot, but, not exclude residential developments for then
Right. Lenore, yes.
multiple lots.
Yes,
and that
I
kind of
agree.
thing. So that might be one way to do that. I, I struggle with the, balance still about, property rights and protecting trees. We all love trees. We have a community that's beautifully full of trees, and that all happens without a tree ordinance. And I'm sure through the years, actually, the city was first platted out, trees were taken down to build houses. And, so and they get replaced. Even in Lennar, I drove by there and took a look, and it kind of clear cut all that. And it looks like they got one tree in front of every house and two behind.
Yeah.
And those little lots, they won't hold much more than that. That's about all when those trees grow, they're gonna be growing into each other way in the back anyway, I think. So, it's not a lot of trees, but, you look and say, really, so we got the second Lennar project that is going now. How would this ordinance affect that? They must have had thousands of trees in that 100 acres. How does that work? If it was in place now. Those trees, by and large, are not very attractive in my book in the first place. And, but anyway, I'm just saying, how do we apply that? We got thousands of trees on 100 acres. What's how do you value those? I mean, they're just kind of scrubby trees. I don't even know whether there's some kind of anyway, what do you say, Drew? I mean, what do we do?
So they would have gone through and done a tree survey, identifying the trees that are 8 inches or larger. Go back to that slide real quick.
Kind of tree they are.
For this, for
Not
the
the
standard
trash trees.
large species, anything 8 inches or larger would be identified. And then depending upon which category, standard or heritage, what percentage they'd be required to either leave in place or plant new trees to replace them.
I didn't walk through there, but from the street, it looked like most of the trees may be smaller than 8 inches. I don't know, maybe there's a few that are close to that. I don't
Right.
know.
And so anything under that would have been able to be removed without any impact through this ordinance.
And, aware what species of trees those are?
I'm not.
I mean, I don't, they look kind of like the cedar, but they're just more treeier than bushier.
Yeah.
So, I think we're all emotionally involved about the trees, but that's part of the reason I'm not too sure they need that much protection. I know we've lost a few trees, but it seemed like most of those, so Hobby Lobby took down a few, not a ton of them. And I'm just wondering, we all want to protect them, and I think that Founder's Tree was certainly an emotional kind of a thing that it kind of relit the fire. But I know it's been on the agenda for longer than that, and I too support the 2050 plan. I want to do that. And yet, I'm just not sure that there's that big of a problem that needs to be solved. We lose a few trees, they get, most places get replanted. I've had a long discussion with, Dr. Bill Rector, and he's got lots of pictures, and he's got maybe more pictures of, that where people have gone to great lengths to save trees and to keep their trees in place. And yes, there are some places where we've lost some trees, but some of that's required because you really can't, in a place like for the Lennar homes, you're going to try to keep the lot prices low. You can't hardly do that. It'd be small, there's not room, you can't save all the trees that are on there, you can't carve out, and it was important for us to have those prices low. And so it just increases the cost of things that get done. And so we impose against property rights for signed ordinances, but that's kind of a thing where we didn't have something. The beauty of the city would go really quick because of the competition, and everybody wanted to put up big signs, and we'd have a big nightmare. And so we just try to balance that a little bit, but people don't like big ugly signs. But people love the trees, and I just don't know how much we need to really save that. So I struggle with it. I wanna support the 2050 plan, but I just don't know that it would really that we really have that big of a problem, because we got a beautiful city with trees without the ordinance. So anyway, that's just kind of a.
Good comments, thank you. Jeff?
I agree with both Councilmember Hughes and McKinney, but also we keep going backwards. We keep going back to the founder's tree. Now, I got text messages the morning it was coming down, and I got pictures, and I remember replying to that text going, what the heck is that? But we need to look forward. 2050 plan, we need to look forward. Unfortunately, that tree's gone. I know it's not what spurred this whole thing, but it is fresh in everybody's mind. And when it keeps coming up in the newspaper, pictures keep showing up on it. Property owners' rights, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the trees out there in Lennar, if you look at them, are a lot of cedar and a lot of junk stuff. But there's a lot 3 houses down from me in the neighborhood. There's no way you could build on that lot without removing the oak trees. And they're beautiful oak trees. But they're right in the middle of the lot, and they're all over the place in the middle, and you couldn't build a home on it. Preservation is very important, but property owners' rights are very important as well. I brought it up yesterday with Dalton, and I'm gonna bring it up again so we can clarify to everybody that's watching or tuning in or wants to know, or that gets reported in the newsletter tomorrow morning with the lead, or, the Daily Times. But Dalton, we talked about if we buy that one parcel of land on the lot that's the big rectangle, say it's 10 acres. We put an alleyway in the back of it, and this is zoned R1 or whatever we want to zone it as. But then I want to go in there and I want to cut that lot up. I want to cut that 10 acres, put an alleyway in, put alley style homes in there. But I want to cut that 10 acres. I want to put, half acre lots on there. And I want to put townhomes on there. Where are we at? I know where we're at, but I want clarification for the other people that don't know. But what prevents somebody from going in there? Because if I just went in there and bought it as a property owner, I could tear every tree off of that thing and then come and ask for a replat.
Very simply, and Drew can attest to this or correct me. If you take 10 acres or any acres lot and you try to break it down into 1 acre increments to try to be exempt from the ordinance, you would have to apply to the entire 10 acre lot before you could. That's correct.
Yeah.
And then you'd also have to have grading. Is that correct? You'd have to have a grading ordinance and everything to go in there and do that. So I agree with it. Property owners' rights, being able to do what you want, but also looking at our big, beautiful, majestic oak trees. they're pretty to look at. It's, and I will also commend staff, because this is ongoing and ongoing and ongoing, and it keeps coming back, and y'all keep changing it for us, and thank y'all. So, I'm just gonna say tonight's gotta be the night. We gotta do something so staff can move on and quit spending their time and resources on a tree ordinance.
All right.
I do have something to say.
Elaine,
Okay.
please.
My whole interest in this was, and still is to this day, more about commercial, more about, well, I call it commercial, but it's basically development into residential communities. Those that take like Whiskey Springs or even Bluewood Apartments that would take, you know, a whole 50 acres and more and just clear. And if you look at Holsworth Drive, as you drive past it to go to Bluewood, for instance, it's a mix of trees. It is not just all junk trees. That's not to say you still wouldn't need to clear those junk trees to actually perform the building, this construction of the building. But I think a tree survey would help when it comes to those large parcels, and I'm not talking about the smaller ones, identifying a plan for roads that would go around the trees, or planning for the development of the houses that would be including the trees in some way. And if they can't do that, at least this ordinance provides for replacement. Because we have trees we planted that at the time were 8 to 10 feet that are now 15 feet tall. So, you know, that's just as important as protecting the clearing of them. So, except for replatting, I'll just say one thing about that. There's a lot next to the lemon tree cleaners on Broadway that has been sold. Someone's gonna do something with it, and I always use this as my example of, would they cut those those beautiful 3 oak trees that are right there on that corner? They could cut those down unless we do something about it. And I don't think they're in the middle of the lot. So I do think they could be worked into a schematic of whatever they plan to build. Unless it's some type of drive-through that's gonna be in their way or something. But, so I'll just go back to saying, my whole emphasis was these developments that are coming to us, whether it's Tybee Commons or Whiskey Springs or Bluewood Apartments, those were my interest was there in trying to start with, let's get a plan before you just come in and take them all down. Not so much about anyone's residential tree. I feel like 99% of people want to keep their trees, except for the rebuilds that do occasionally happen. And so that's my 2 cents, and I'm just going to stick with it. But I think this is as close as we can probably get to satisfying all those things.
How difficult would it be to amend the draft in between readings to exempt smaller lots, as Brenda suggested? Would
We
that be
could do that.
difficult?
Yes.
It would be difficult?
No, sorry, we could do that. That would be very simple.
Because I think that makes a lot of sense, especially on small lots.
Residential.
And real quick, Mayor and Council, Councilmember McKinney had brought up, you know, could the potential of just exempting residential, so whether you have a 100-acre lot that just wants to put a house on it, would just doing a blanket saying if you're building a residential house on a property, whether that's 1 acre, 5 acres, whatever, would that be better for council, or stick with the kind of the 1 acre exemption on there?
You'll think?
I think it's a single-family residence, I
Yeah.
think it'd be all right.
Yeah,
I think so too.
They'd have to divide it up if they're gonna do more houses, and then
Right.
that would be.
Mhm.
Well, we'll take a look at both and in between and see which one would be better for that. If you only do one acre, then there's that chance, again, full transparency of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Somebody has a 5-acre lot, 4 acres of that's unusable. They're trying to put, you know, a house on there, and then we're kind of back to the variance process. But there is still a variance process in
There
there
is.
as well that can add, that gives some flexibility in it. So we'll take a look at those.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely an acre or less, and then if it's a 5-acre tract or a 7-acre tract, but there's still intent on just having a family dwelling there, then I think they could come in with their site plan and get a variance, and I think it, you know, would be well received.
And to Councilwoman Sigerman's point, having that plan up front, they can work around that.
Yeah.
Because this doesn't say they have to keep every tree that's
Right.
over 8 inches.
Right.
So from 8 to 24 inches, they only have to keep 40% of
Yeah.
those trees.
Yeah,
So that still gives room for most building sites, taking into topography into account. Again, heritage trees are 24 inches larger, we're required to keep 60% of those. But if they're planning ahead for that with the tree survey, they can certainly work through that. If they have to remove a couple more than the preservation requirement, they can always replant or pay the fee in lieu to make that balance. So there still is quite a lot of flexibility in what's drafted.
Other comments, Delane? No?
Well, I was thinking about an example, where we were going to, Vintage Heights was going to develop long ago. Is that in the city?
It is,
Okay, so that's more than 10 acres.
right.
There again, I think there's a single home being constructed on that property, correct?
I don't know if they,
Well, they've got a
that's their
huge gate.
plan, yes.
So all I'm saying is that's an example of where they could clear as much as they wanted. They're over 10 acres. It's residential. It's in the city.
If that's the exemption we want to go to, yes.
I'm just saying, I just think.
If we left it at 1 acre, they would still have to apply for a permit, even though they're removing 10 or 15 of the trees in that 200-plus acres, but
Because that's, the thing we're trying to avoid is just this, total extreme clearing of a whole path of trees, not just a single tree in someone's yard.
correct.
It's just, I don't know what you do with that, but put it in your pipe and smoke it, I guess.
All right. Mr. Mearsham Pipe.
thank you, Drew.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Go ahead, Kent, please.
Thank you all of y'all.
Oh, no, please.
So I was getting the big picture thing, I got a few details that I'd like to visit about. So the definition of development, the final, comment is, or any other site work that may damage or destroy a protected tree. So development means, to bring it, if they might damage or destroy a protected tree, they get drawn into this anyway. That part, I think, is overly broad and too vague.
Okay.
Anybody. You could make up almost anything.
Okay.
We're really trying to talk about construction or development things and not anything that might, it seems.
Well, if it's any site work, excuse me, any site work that may damage it. So if they're working on the site, whether they're mowing, grading, clearing,
They might be,
surveying, as long as they're not taking the trees out to do that.
but if they're not even planning to build anything, or if they're just cleaning up their site, or it just seems kind of open-ended. It might be determined that it's site work, and maybe who says it's site work, or I don't know. It just seems, the result is to construct something new, especially commercial. I think I'm kind of interested in, and if we're kind of taking the residential part out of this, then that makes it a lot better. So are we not, or, that's what we were just kind
I
of,
think what Brenda is suggesting is lot size for residential. I don't know.
but
that-
we also talked about, if it's just for a single family, we would be exempt.
And Delane, are you on board with that, or?
Well, I am, I guess the other thing I would say to summarize is, this can be amended, correct? So to get this off the ground and start something happening to protect trees, because I could probably think of something next week that I didn't think of tonight.
Of course.
I'm in agreement with that. I like what Brenda suggested. I think it may have some, there may be some exemptions, like, we didn't think of that, but I think we should go with something to start the ball rolling.
And we can,
Not try to make this perfect tonight.
and certainly plan to bring it back 6 or 12 months from now with anything that
Yeah.
has come up or issues that we've run into on projects.
Because, the one thing that I think, y'all, is that, we didn't do this under the cover of darkness. We have beat this horse to death, trying to get something that we feel is fair and agreeable to our community as a whole. So if we could get something out there, we can always amend it if we need to, you know? And we've got a variance process in place for, you know, exceptions and that sort of thing. So, I mean, you know, I think this is a good start.
Mayor, council, real quick, you know, to Councilmember McKinney's point on like the development stuff, I think, I'd say probably the best way to tackle this ordinance, and maybe even some other ones, the first thing that folks need to look at is the exemptions, because if you're exempted, the development agreement, or the development definition is really kind of a moot point.
Yeah.
It's only gonna apply to those that the ordinance would actually apply to. You know, we want it to be broad, because then we're not, you know, diving too much into the government involvement piece in a way. So if they look at the exemptions, if they're exempt, then they can go really do whatever they want on their property, and it's a moot point. If they fall under the criteria that then they would have to go do that, then the development definition would apply, and they would have to take that into consideration. But the exemptions are kind of the starting point for the ordinance. If they're exempt from it, the definition is moot.
So this is on our agenda for tonight. Hopefully, we can come up with a consensus tonight. And then we'll move on to other pressing matters before the city. Well, one other thing, we're not reinventing the wheel. Staff looked at other tree ordinances around the state. It's not something that was created ad hoc. Staff has done a good job trying to find workable tree preservation ordinances. So it's on our agenda tonight. I hope everybody will come to the show, see what happens. Is it okay if we move on then?
Yes, thank
Do
you.
we need to, not in this later, okay.
Yes,
never mind.
ma'am. 2C, update regarding Ridgeland and Wind Ridge subdivisions. Mr. Hornis,
Mayor, members of council, Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy New Year.
So we'll do just a quick high-level summary on both Lennar's Windbridge and Ridgeland subdivisions. And kind of dovetails from our last conversation, because it is hard to build a subdivision with 45-foot wide lots without taking out a bunch of trees. That's a very, very complicated process. You know, it certainly has its challenges. They're not overcome, or they are overcome all the time. But it would have been a more interesting conversation with that topography as we were doing that. But we have two subdivisions, and just wanted to talk through where we're currently at with Ridgeland. So Ridgeland's 130 lots. Excuse the picture, it's not the most current. This is the most current aerial image that we have. There are significantly more homes that have been built. Actually, 80 homes have sold so far. That's based on the closing data from Lennar. And it appears that they have another 8 under contract that haven't been sold yet. That part's on their website there. We don't actually get the information until it is closed and we receive confirmation from the documents. Now, I asked the staff to kind of run some of the numbers. The average net sale price since its inception is $254,000. Now, if you remember the agreements that we have in place, each year those agreements are set with a maximum value. 2019, when the first agreement was inked, it was $227,000. That is the AFMI, average median family income. And so that is that number. Well, that is not that number. That is the income for those folks. That number back then was $57,000-ish. And as you can see, in 2023, that number has jumped up significantly, right, to $275,000. Well, that is in part because the average median family income has gone from $57,000 to $86,000, I think even, or $86,500 for Kirk County. And so it's interesting trying to find the balance in how were you supposed to accomplish this. And I wasn't here in 2020 when this first one was done, but I was certainly a part of the second iteration of it. And it's an interesting conversation. How do you balance all these things out? one of the things that's been brought up is, how does this meet all the affordability categories, right, of like a federal home program? Well, the intent of it is not for it to be a federal home program. Otherwise, we would have implemented one. We would have a housing authority, and the homes would be bought for folks who only make below 80% AMFI. But realistically, we needed houses, right? We needed houses that had a cap on a value so that people could move in. And how do we accomplish that, right? We accomplish that by setting that limit on the price and setting some parameters for how much that value could increase. And simply put, it was at 2.9%. And if you run the numbers from 2.9% to today, from 227, you don't get to 275. But we also had a provision in there that says as TDHCA and the AMFI from HUD adjust, that number will adjust accordingly. And that's where we get to 275. So it's slightly higher than if it was just a 2.9% increase adjusted for inflation over each year. But last year and the year prior, I think everybody who had to buy a house will remember just handing over cash quickly and saying, I'll just give you whatever you need. And prices went through the roof, right? And so I think the increase from 21 to 22 went from like 251 to 275. So that was a big jump. In any event, as they're building these homes are selling right away. They are not sitting on the market. They're not doing anything. We have staff members here who bought them, spoken to members around the community that are doing the same. I would imagine, and Lennar has told us, that 30% of their business model is investors buying homes so that folks can rent. And that was a part of our conversation was, well, we need all these to be home owned. And it really is not, it's just not the nature of workforce. Some of the workforce folks can afford to purchase a home, and some folks are not just there yet, and they need a rental. And they maybe don't want to be in a rental apartment. They want to move their family into a rental home. And so how do you do that? Well, an investor has to buy it. And so I think that was part of the distinction. And some of the confusion around was, this is not a federal program. This is not even a state program. This is a city program. And how do we set those parameters, right? And so by and large, it has been a success. There's been some hiccups along the way. Lennar, they have a way of making me and Julie angry sometimes because it's a little complicated when you're trying to do the math on the closings. How do they come up with these numbers? Because you see the maximum sales price can't be over $275 this year. You go to Lennar and you'll see a house that's listed for $305 or something like that. Well, that's a $30,000 delta. How do you do that, right? How do you accomplish that? And there's a couple of ways that they can do that. They do that through closing cost assistance, which is allowed within the agreement as a subtraction of the sales price. They have other incentive measures that they could use to include their interest rate buy down. So running the numbers, if they had a 4.5% interest at Lennar for that home, and you had a 6.5% interest, I don't know where it is today, but it's fluctuating, I think, right around 6.5 to 7%, somewhere in there. Y'all are bankers and you'll tell me better. The delta in that is, on a monthly basis, is $300 a month. On the life of a 30-year FHA loan, it's $130,000 worth of interest that you're saving. And so it gets them to a net sales price, right? So then there's the distinction between the sales price and the net sales price. And so when interest rates go back down to a level that matches the mortgage rates that they bought, well, then there's no delta. The delta is you're selling homes at the same mortgage rate as everybody else, and so your prices need to reflect that. So that kind of encompasses that closing cost assistance. I say it 20 times a week sometimes, and I'm like, I still change a little bit of it, the iteration. So if you have questions about that before we move to the next one, I will happily answer them.
So, the difference in the interest would be a net present value of those, not just a total.
Not a total, yeah, net present value. So, so that is what's calculated within their spreadsheets that they send us for their closings. That's what they do, yeah. Just illustrating it for the,
Right.
you know,
So
but yes, sir.
not adding up the interest over all 30 years.
It doesn't represent 130 grand a day. It's more like 10 or 15, something like that, $20,000. So that, in addition to any closing costs or any other buy downs that they have, help factor that in. And the other part is, if somebody comes in and they want to pay cash, that house has to be less than $275,000 right off the bat.
Period, yep.
Now, they might not get any closing cost assistance. They'll be paying $5,000, $10,000 for that. So there's a couple of different iterations. But yes, sir.
Bottom line is they're keeping to their commitment on the prices.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
They're finding buyers.
And they're absolutely finding buyers. So much so that they are fully underway on the second subdivision, which is the
Wow,
Woodbridge.
they've got a lot of work done out there.
They certainly have. I have a call into them, and I haven't gotten a response back about kind of their projected timeline to be completed with their infrastructure. I imagine it's going to take a little time. There is a lot. It's fairly decent topography out in that area. They've got to build a big retention pond. So I see it every morning when I'm dropping my son off at middle school, and drive around that one and then drive through the first one. And so that will be 490 homes, all, again, to continue that same model. And there was two components to it. One, the EIC grant that helped with the regional infrastructure for that area. And then TERS number 2, as you all, I think we're all a part of, that was created to help pay down that infrastructure cost that they were gonna have. And with that, therein lies the regional infrastructure, a lot of it right there. So they'll be building the roads, the detention ponds. You gotta orient yourself a little bit, 90 degrees to the right. I guess the loop is on the bottom, Olympic is on the left there. And they are blowing and going. They are moving fast. And so it is a large part of the housing conversation that we have all had. You know, part of that future development conversation that we have as a staff level have centered around, well, a lot of the attainable housing programs or projects that council wanted to get done are completed by this for the homes, for single-family homes. As far as incentives go and considerations of TERS and PIDs and things like that. We'll come back, I think, next month with a presentation on more of a robust, like citywide CIP, you know, where do we want to go, what the new housing study talks about. But with both of these developments, I think the single-family home workforce housing market, I believe it's met. So with that, I will turn it over to you for any questions, Mayor.
I don't know if any of you have driven out to see the one with the 80 houses that have been sold, but, you know, it's abstract up here when we talk about it. And I wasn't part of the conversation of that portion. I was elected in 2022. But that's a neighborhood. You drive through it and there's trees and there's planting and there's stuff on the porch and there's bicycles and there's kids playing in the yard. It's from here, it looks like, oh, it's a plat and, oh, there's a TERS. But it's actually meeting, it appears to be meeting a need. I have heard from someone who is silly enough to drive around and take pictures of Christmas lights, that was one of the most decorated neighborhoods in our community. All right, thank you for the report. Any questions for Mr. Hornis?
No, I just want to say, I popped in and met a home consultant at Lenore, and she showed me the model home, what's included in it. I was very impressed. It's like move-in ready, except for the refrigerator. There are 2 replacement trees that you get included. And then I stopped and met a Vietnam veteran who actually lives there with his wife in one of the homes, who used his GI Bill to move in and loves it. I mean, he probably would have built it a little differently, construction-wise, but for the affordability aspect, it's doing what it purported to do. And I saw cars parked in the driveway, not on the street. It's a very homey feeling, and he said his neighbors are just wonderful. They're all neighborly, and it's a community, like you said. It is. That's what we wanted. So my question to Dalton yesterday was, with these new potential future developments coming to us, is this meeting our needs, or are we still behind, like usually highways are behind the need, in building them? Are we kind of meeting because I had asked him, how many homes did we need and how many do we have new? Like, are we getting close to 80% of that, or 50%? Or we still need new developments?
So that'll be part of next month's conversation.
Okay.
The 2019 housing study, 2018 or 2019, I can't remember, said that the city of Kerrville needed 3,000 plus doors.
Right.
And that was pre-COVID, right? COVID hit and a lot of people moved to Kerrville. And so I think it exacerbated the issue a little bit more even.
Right.
So you take that number and you could probably bump it up a little bit. So here we are today. We have 300 homes-ish going in on the back of Comanche Trace. We have proposed 620 homes here with Lennar. You've got 275 doors with the Bluewood, and a few other smaller, 50 lots, let's say, something like that around. 100 lots maybe, if you include, Mariposa subdivision with Habitat, and then just other random lots. So you're looking at 1,000, 1,300, right? Out of that 3,000.
Close to half.
It is close to half. So, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, it's great. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's a fairly decent timeline that you should build to this, right? And the housing studies will speak to that. And I think we, want to bring the conversation to you about what is the balance, right? Because you will see a housing need, right? You'll see protect our infrastructure and, how do we balance the conservation and the growth at the same time? And so I think we've reiterated, like, conservation's our biggest effort, right? And Stuart would stand up here and say that. And what are the opportunities that we have before us to meet these goals while at the same time meeting, these challenges? And so that's probably that's the conversation for next month.
Okay, that's good. It's good to know. And I will say that firefighters, police officers, teachers, there's 3 sets of teachers that bought 3 homes. So they're sharing the cost of the home and working at Tybee and working at Peterson. And so I thought that was kind of
Nice. Any other questions for Mr. Hornitz?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Michael.
Thank
Got all
you,
worked
Michael.
up for nothing. Yeah, all right.
All right, so I'm going to adjourn this workshop at 5:19.